My Christmas break obligations have finally slowed down, and in my search for a new thing to review, I finally broke down and watched The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, mostly because I'm too big of a to watch something like Nosferatu. I gotta say, after watching the movie, I can see why it stopped being talked about after a week, because it is an absolute bore filled with girl bosses, iffy animation, lore stretches, and breaks. This movie, if you haven't heard, is the story about how Helm's Deep got its name and the daughter of Helm Hammerhand, who, in this movie's opinion, was one of, if not the key person that made that happen. I say in this movie's opinion because, according to J.R.R. Tolkien, Helm's daughter, who he didn't even bother naming, had virtually nothing to do with it. But Warner Brothers and the writers, being the terrible businessmen that they are, decided they knew better than the greatest fantasy author ever and came up with this failure. And unfortunately, they got Philippa Boyens and Peter Jackson involved somehow to try and sell it. I'm not sure how much they were involved, and I hope it was minimal because it is not a good look for them if they were driving the team this direction. I know they needed to make something in order to keep the Lord of the Rings rights and keep Amazon at bay from getting everything, and I think animated short movies based on the appendices could work. But they decided to show Amazon that they are also incompetent when it comes to adapting the appendices instead of smack him in the face in a that's how it's done moment. I don't think the War of Rohirrim is as bad as Rings of Power. It has its moments, like I liked Helm Hammerhand, and I thought a lot of the character design and the world looked great. The major thing that this movie has going against it is the main character and the fact that it's just kind of boring. Okay, so spoilers, I guess, even though it's in the appendices of the very old books. The story loosely is about a war that broke out when King Helm Hammerhand kills Lord Freka, father of this guy Wolf, who had just propositioned the marriage between Wolf and Hera, the daughter of Helm. After Helm calls him fat and other based insults, they go outside to fight it out, and Helm kills Freka with one punch. Wolf gets rejected by Hera, who says a line about not wanting to marry any man, which I've seen people saying it is implying she plays for the other team. I think with modern day writers, that could absolutely be what they meant, but there was nothing really else in the movie kind of showing her preference and partner, and she could have easily just meant that she's not interested in marriage, period. But either way, she rejects Wolf, and he's the big mad simp about it, only to then go outside and see his dad get Saitama. Wolf vows vengeance after getting banished and then fucks off for seasons. There is an incident with a war elephant while out riding, and Hera gets kidnapped by Wolf, who has been busy gaining power and forces. She learns about his plans because Wolf just kind of tells her everything since he's still simping after her. And then Hera escapes thanks to overpowered old shield maiden lady and her cousin. So yeah, Helm is a bit pissed about daughter almost getting killed, and they go to war. Wolf wins the first battle, and Hera's brothers are, oh no, killed. Helm and his forces retreat to the fortress to be later called Helm's Deep. Wolf does a siege on the fortress till like winter, when a distraught over the sun's King Helm eventually leaves the keep to take revenge and starts taking out Wolf's forces by himself in an almost supernatural way, making people think he is no longer a man of the living and that he was a wraith. Hera finds a secret passage out of the keep and runs into orcs looking for rings. Helm saves Hera, and then Hera saves Helm, and they run back to the fortress because Wolf would have heard the commotion. They waste some time talking before running, and then they don't use the secret passage tunnel thing for some reason. I guess they just instantly forgot about that. And then Helm decides to sacrifice himself for no real reason. Because, I mean, they were at the door of the fortress. He had time to get in there. Wolf couldn't get through that door for this whole siege, and they had no real reason to imply why he would be able to get through it now. But I guess the plot needed him to die so Hera can then be made in charge and declare the keep Helm's Deep. Winter then ends, and Hera does the final showdown with Wolf and wins, of course, and then refuses the throne to give it to her cousin, and then instead rides off with Old Lady Shield Maiden to go see Gandalf. And, because she is a wild one that no one can tame or whatever. I guess she doesn't make it to Gandalf because, as the movie points out, she is never heard of again in any other Lord of the Rings, and this movie is performing so badly, I will eat what's left of my hair if it gets a sequel. If you were bored with that plot synopsis and think surely with the animation, battles, and dialogue, the actual movie can't be that boring, well, unfortunately, it kinda is. The baseline is there because, Tolkien put it there in the appendix, but what they fill the gaps in with is not very Tolkien. The movie is way too long and the time is wasted. The villain isn't that interesting. Helm you like because he's a badass and Brian Cox did the voice, and that's about it. You don't know enough about the brothers to really feel any sort of emotion when they get killed. Shield Maiden Lady is just a dull, powerful, much better than any man in the movie except maybe Helm Woman. And Hera also is just a dull, no personality girl boss who doesn't really go on any sort of journey or arc. Much like a lot of modern day written female characters, she was just kind of powerful all along and just needed to be reaffirmed about it and told that, hey, we all know you're a badass. We're sorry we didn't think that, and you were right all along. I will say it was nice that Hera actually looked like a woman and was even a redhead. That is unheard of in modern female characters, so good job, what was probably the Japanese animation studio's decision. But unfortunately, even with that character design overall, there is not much to really grab with this movie. The story was lackluster and just didn't have much to it, so it being executed not very well didn't grab me as the audience. The Easter eggs to the other characters in the movies did nothing for me since I still have the taste of Rings of Power in my mouth. And even though it is a different studio, unfortunately Amazon can still do damage to the brand. A lot of general audiences don't follow the ins and outs of pop culture that close, so Lord of the Rings is just Lord of the Rings to them, and lately, it hasn't been great. So Warner Brothers has to be better to rise above that challenge, and they just missed with this one. Even the animation seemed rushed and had a lot of time and frame rates that just dropped randomly, and it could be hard to watch. The mix of animation styles between the background of the characters didn't really work that well for me. Each piece was lovely to look at, the background was beautiful and felt like Middle Earth, and like I said before, I liked the character design. Put them together and it just didn't mix very well. The fight scenes especially didn't look very good. The actual fight choreography was relatively fine, but again, the motion and animation had some weird frame stuff where maybe it was slow in some spots and then hyper fast in others, and you just sometimes didn't really know what was happening. So I couldn't even turn my brain off and just look at the pretty colors. So yeah, Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. Man, what a movie to memory hole and never think of again. I am sorry to say that the Lord of the Rings franchise is starting to see some damage, and the box office kind of proves it. The original movies and books will always go down in history as one of the greatest things ever made. And, the Hobbit trilogy will kind of be like the Star Wars prequel levels of notoriety of hit or miss, love it or hate it. But this and the Rings of Power just aren't good enough to stand next to that group, and really just aren't made for anyone.
And this goes on and back and forth for 90 or so minutes until the movie just sort of ends.